Alright, what's up everybody? So today was a lower body training session, starting off with some hack squats. As far as hack squats go for myself, I'm definitely a bit longer limbed and hip dominant, so this is a lift that I've just come to accept will feel awkward. And for anybody that's built similarly to myself, it will probably always feel a little bit awkward for you too. But the problem with that is it's just a feeling. Just because it feels a little bit awkward or you don't feel as powerful as you would on something like a low bar squat or a leg press isn't necessarily a valid reason not to do it. Because one of the best things you can do for hypertrophy is actually get out of your comfort zone and challenge the muscles that your body would normally try and shelter during the movement. So for myself, training something like my quads, the way my body naturally wants to squat is to let my hips take over. So doing something like a hack squat where the back pad forces your hips to stay under your shoulders, which naturally pushes your knees forwards, it forces my quads to work. So I feel a little bit quote unquote helpless. I don't feel as strong. I'm certainly not as strong in terms of weight that I can put up on that compared to something where I can use more hips. That obviously goes without saying, but for someone that's hip dominant especially, it's a good thing to get out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself and challenge your joints and muscles in positions that your body wouldn't naturally take them through. So it's not a natural feeling movement, but in terms of hypertrophy, it's great. And I'm adding reps regularly. It's a super strict lift, and that's a good indicator that my quads are growing. I didn't have a chance to talk about the hamstring curls. Those are pretty straightforward. I like to bend a little bit more forwards to get even more stretch on the hamstrings. I take those to 0 RAR. They feel great. I'll probably be taking those to and past failure moving forward because I think I can handle it. Some calf raises here. My goal here is to push these as hard as I possibly can. I'll go to basically failure, so I'll do as many reps as I can do, all the way up with full range of motion, and then once I fail, I'll hold that for a second and get that nice isometric, and then go into length and partials, do as many of those as I can, and then hold a weighted stretch at the end for at least a few seconds. This has been working super nice for my calves. Part of my recent calf growth is, one, just from more consistency, but two, it's from these new methods where before I would probably bounce a bit too much and I wouldn't get all the way down, wouldn't get all the way up. Calves are something where you have to be very precise in order to get them to grow, and that means training hard, that means training through a full range of motion, and of course doing it consistently and usually not doing it right at the end of the session. Pendulum squats are up next. This has to be the most natural most natural feeling leg movement I've ever done. Pretty much the polar opposite of hack squats, but you can use a bit more hips, but you still get the quads nice and challenged in the pendulum squat through a full range of motion. The way the tension curve is set up allows it to basically add weight as you press up, so it matches the natural strength curve of your quads. It feels really nice. Up next, we're moving on to these single arm dumbbell rows. I would always recommend doing these with straps, and one thing that you'll notice with my technique here is it's a bit of a rounded back row. So my upper back is rounded, and the reason I do this is to emphasize the stretch in my upper back, particularly like the mid to low traps and rhomboid area. And I do get a little bit of lat work here, but that's unintentional. Any lat growth I get from this, as I say, is just a bonus. And the reason I focus so much on the stretch on this, it's the same thing as with my dumbbell pressing. I don't just do the top half of the range of motion, which is equivalent to the top half of the range of motion on a row where you're just focusing on the squeeze. You want to go for the full stretch, even if it's at the expense of a little bit of contraction on the rows, in my opinion. Up next, we're doing some power shrugs. With these, this is my first time doing them with the barbell in a very, very, very long time. I have the lever arms in my home gym, so I can use those, and it's a neutral grip, similar to a trap bar, but of course it's stable since it's a lever arm attached to the rack, so it's essentially like a machine. So these feel a bit awkward, so I'm not doing anything too crazy. I'm going higher reps with quote-unquote lighter weight, really just focusing on that stretch portion of the lift. And this is a lift that you can get a lot out of with very little fatigue. And speaking of a lift that gets you maybe just as much with probably even less fatigue, especially systemically, is this paused rack pull. So I just set these up at the knee. The rack pull isn't the portion that we're focusing on, it's the pause portion that's important. So with this, I'm just trying to get as much of a weighted stretch as I can in my upper traps from doing this lift. It's very easy to set up if you already have rack pulls set up, and it just gives you that extra benefit of the weighted stretch with very, very little fatigue and very little time or setup cost if you already have a barbell out. So doing these after RDLs or power shrugs, in my opinion, it's something that I like to experiment with. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm not telling you not to do it. It's just something I'm experimenting with and have had success with in the past. So I'm just keeping them in because I like them.